Okay. Do we have everyone back is the real question. Okay, yeah, let's do that. One's in chat if you can hear me. Cool. Okay, cool. All right. So this is the first actual lecture. And Jordan did briefly mention this, that I'm going to go over some of the concepts very lightly, so you're familiar with them, and we're going to use them more in depth over following weeks. So if there's a lot of moving parts at first, welcome to JavaScript. It only gets worse. The good part is the familiarity you'll have will get you a lot more comfortable. So I can't really assume anyone's programming level of competence or anything right off the bat. Uh, some of you who have taken or have learned on your own about other programming languages might see this as a little different from, say, what you do in C++ or C Sharp. Um, but the JavaScript way of doing things is very particular. So I kind of staged a application for us, and this is all in Replit, which is going to become your best friend over the next couple months and maybe the next couple years. I use Replit on an almost daily basis for programming. Um, the slides are blurry. Uh, is Replit blurry? Uh, if Yeah, it looks like a little blurry on here too. Um, so if you're on desktop, it gives you a choice of video quality, and if it's set to auto, it might go to something a little smaller. Um, it's saying the source audio quality is 680p. Um, I'm not sure if that's something I can adjust on my end or right. Okay. Um, hmm. Okay, and it still looks blurry for Replit as well. Is that a little better for everyone? Hmm. Right. I appreciate everyone's patience with this. It appears that the video quality is leaving a little bit to be desired, and I'm not sure what I can do to change the quality without experimenting a whole bunch. But yeah, that's really blurry. Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, like I said, I appreciate everyone's patience here. Um, at the most basic level, a JavaScript program a P5JS program has this kind of format where you have a setup routine and a draw routine. And this comes from another programming library for Java called processing. And P5.js is basically a version of processing for JavaScript instead of Java. And if you've ever heard of Arduino, that uses a similar library for programming an electronic circuit board that you can power robotics. And it's been heavily influenced by processing. So anything you learn here, you can apply it to Arduino and make robots, which is awesome, but this is not a robotics class. So what are we going to do? We're going to be drawing stuff. And we're also going to be putting some words on the screen, but for the most part, we're going to care about geometry and graphic operations. So if you kind of think of the setup function as getting a piece of paper and laying it flat on a table, and the drawing part is everything that happens after that, that's a good way to divide up your code. As we'll soon see, sometimes what goes in the setup function, you can put in the draw function. So the other day zero thing you need to know about are comments. And comments are a way for you to write notes to yourself. But I also find them useful for basically blocking out sections of code as I work on it. If I don't want something, but I don't want to copy and paste it somewhere else and delete it. So I've added a little more to the program. And this first operation, we have two numbers here. If you wanted to guess what those two numbers were, and you said those were the length and width of the box that you're drawing in, you'd be totally correct. So you can change that to really anything you want. And this one is too small, so this happens if we put in a really big number. Okay, that's huge. As you can see, it have to scroll the page to find the words a lot. So if you keep a running metaphor of a piece of paper on a table, and then this sets up everything about that piece of paper, that's a really good way to approach it. Now, the next operation is this color operation. And here we have three numbers. And each of those corresponds to I got some good questions in the chat. Someone asked, how do we know where the text goes? So right now we're setting up the piece of paper. So we don't really care about what's on the piece of paper yet. But we do care about the color of the paper. So what we do is we use this color operation to set what the background is going to be. So it was 0, 0, 0. Now it's 255, 255, 255. And does anyone want to wager a guess as to what this is going to make happen? Put it in the chat if you want to wager a guess. Whitish, okay. It's Daniel's guess. Does anyone have another idea? White, not whitish, okay. Let's see. Oh, so now we have a white background. And because this background is on a white page, it looks like we don't have a background there at all. So what if we put in, give me some colors, give me some numbers between 0 and 255 in the chat. $115. Okay. I'm going to go 21 and 55. Does anyone have any guess as to what color this is going to be? No guesses. I don't want to wager a guess either. Okay, it's like a burgundy color. maroon maybe. Um, Getting some good answers in the chat. So it's the same color operation works where it says text color, and we can be totally uncreative and just set it to 0. And we know pretty much what to expect. Now, there's not a lot else to set up right now. So let's go to the second part of the program where we're going to draw everything. Now, here, we're using X and Y as variables. And X and Y can be anything. Let's be silly. And instead of a number, let's make it just a string. Now, we got a bunch of errors here. Apparently, we can't make one of the dimensions just a word, which is what we'd expect. But you can do things like that in Java. Right. So in the chat, someone asked where I'm writing my code. This is Replit, which is a website, and the lab portion tonight, we're going to go over making everyone an account because all of our work is going to be in Replit. So now we can, so we have the size variable, and we can change it to be really big, change it to be 1,000. Actually, I don't want anyone following this. I just want them seeing the parts of the program, and then I'm going to share everything else. Right. Yeah. To the person who just asked that, we'll do something as a group. I just wanted to go over the basic structure. So looks like we made it a little bit too big, so we can't see it anymore. So okay, so now we can do pretty much anything, and if it's too big, it just won't show up. Now, JavaScript is a visual programming language, so we can use special variables that give us access to where our mouse pointer's at. So now, because we're setting the size of the text to be equal to the mouse's x coordinate, as I move it left to right, the size will change. And this isn't really useful as an application, but because JavaScript is a visual programming language, you're going to be needing to get your mouse coordinates a lot, especially if you're making games or anything with any sort of user interaction involved. So there you have that. That's now, I had a question earlier how it knows how to center it. Because JavaScript is a visual programming language, you also have reserved keywords, which are in all capital letters, and that'll correspond to the center of the drawing box. So we change it to maybe 10, we have it offset, and it gives us an error because it didn't really expect that. So and again, these special operations, text align, text size, and fill, those are operations that act on the text itself. So text color is basically a variable pointing to this color object. Now, we don't need the color object itself. Because we have basically the same thing here. So we don't need to use variables to get the intended result, but leaving in these variables is kind of like a nickname for that, for those three color values. The same thing, we can do the same thing with the background color, and now made everything white, or we made everything black. Can't read it. The text should be there, but can't read it. So anyways, as you can see, I have the text print command here twice, but we've only seen it once. Does anyone want to wager a guess in the chat as to why we're only seeing hello world once? Okay. Great, everyone gave the right answer. So if we change the string to not hello, we can see that they're clearly overlapping. So what do we do now? Does anyone have any ideas? Well, the text command that we have here, we can't just tell it to just print something. It's going to give us an error. It needs to know the x and y coordinates. So instead of x and y that we set earlier, let's just put 10 and 20. So this puts the starting position of the text way up in the corner, which is not really what we wanted. So if we change it back, we've got, as you recall, the x value and the y values are set as variables here. X is basically half of the canvas, half of the drawing box's width, and then the y value is set to 50. And then we have a variable size here, 30. So when it's putting text on the drawing box, it's putting it at 50 plus 30 times 2. So we want to put more things on the page, we'd have to change the y offset. And we can keep doing that by changing the third value of this operation. Okay, yeah. So one thing some of you have noticed already is the x and y are different in origin compared to like your standard geometry, where 0, 0 is in the lower left-hand corner. These start at the top left corner. So 0, 0 is all the way at the top. Why that is probably a good historical reason. If any of you are interested in finding out why, come to office hours and tell me, because I'm not exactly sure why we draw things from the top left or instead of the top, or instead of the bottom left. But that convention is pretty much standard in most visual programming. Great. So that's your very, very gentle introduction to a full JavaScript program, and has some variables. It has some built-in functions. It's not as straightforward to get started in JavaScript compared to, say, C++ or C#, but it's not that unwieldy either. There's I'm going to post this link in chat. So as I said earlier, I want everyone to be gently familiarized with a lot of the concepts that we have to reuse. And colors is extremely important, being that JavaScript is a visual programming language. So I found this resource here that's pretty useful for picking out colors. Maybe in your future projects or something, you can come up with a cool color scheme that way. And basically, it lets you pick the hue, which is the basic shade, the saturation, which is how powerful or strong that color is, and then the lightness, which is how much black pigment has been added to it, and then alpha, which is how transparent the color is. And on the right-hand side, you'll see three different representations for those colors. The top one where it says, yeah, I really apologize. Okay, the most useful for you, besides being able to pick out colors that you like, that's a good one. You can just copy and paste this RGB value right here, and you can just drop it into your JavaScript, change RGB to color, and then there you go. You have whatever color that was. So hopefully many of you will reuse this and get really creative. And shout outs to Daniel. Yes, and you can use hex. I will show you how to do that. So hexadecimal is based on values between 0 and 15 or 1 and 16. And it's better for representing colors because everything is conveniently a value between 0 and 255. So building it off of hex is more straightforward. So if you want to just straight use hexadecimal values, you'll still use the color operation, but you'll put the full hex value in quotes, and it has the this little trailing symbol. I believe people used to call it the octathorpe, but now it's # or hash tag. Now basically this is a number. Each of these you can probably have figured out by now, but each of these is a hexadecimal number that corresponds to a number between 0 and 255. So anything that you represent here corresponds to a normal number. Well, in this case, a triple of these three numbers corresponds to this. So 63 in hexadecimal is 3F, BF is 191, 7F is 127. And you don't need to know any hexadecimal beyond that. I recommend using tools because not everyone is that good with imagining colors and then translating it to 3 different RGB values. So I definitely recommend using tools like this. And reading the chat. Cool. Now, one more thing that I thought was cool was the special variables to get the mouse position values. So what if we just set the mouse values, tied the mouse values to the background color? Yeah, I substituted in. Right, that's what I. Yeah, the way I got it set up was I put it the background color. Yeah, I already did it. Yeah. Wow, really cool. So this is another useless example. However, like I said, being a visual programming language, your mouse coordinates giving you real-time input into whatever you're trying to display is very powerful. And most of the programming paradigm that makes up the p5.js library builds on this back and forth between getting some form of user input, whether it's just the mouse position or if it's something they typed or something of that sort, and then dynamically giving them feedback. So um, I've been studying computer science for a while, and I've yet to take any classes where on day one I can make colors change in real time according to my mouse position. So that's one of the cool things about JavaScript is if I wanted to do this in C++, I would be working on months building a graphics library from the ground up. Whereas with JavaScript, I just have p5.js available, and it does all these things out of the box. So yeah, at the very start of this tutorial, I said separate things between setup and draw. And sometimes the things in setup can go into draw, and you'll have a different time, a different experience with it. So basically, just try to maintain a visual metaphor of setting up a piece of paper or a blank canvas. They use the metaphor of a canvas, which is useful. If you're painting, you're going to prepare a canvas in a certain way. You're going to put primer on there and do a lot of other things before you even put paint on the brush and then start working on it. So you want to think of when you're creating programs, just how to divide things up. And there's only two ways to divide them up right now. We'll see a lot of other ways that are more complicated later on. But for now, really, this is all the moving parts you have. Checking out the chat. Yeah, like for C++, there's so many libraries out now that you really wouldn't be making something from the ground up. You would probably get like Unity or the Unreal Engine or something of that sort. But it really just depends on your use case. Are there any other questions in the chat before we move on? Oh yeah, and extra spaces do not affect the code at all. Python, they will make your life a nightmare, but in JavaScript, it doesn't matter. um, okay, so if we don't have any more questions, I'll just drive on. So now this is going to be blurry. Oh gosh, that's not readable. I'm so sorry. Um, yeah, if you want, I'm still concerned about the the general issue of the quality. But we can work on that after. um, yeah, we're just waiting on Jordan to switch over the slides. Okay. Jordan, do you want to cut out for the break early, possibly? That was pretty much it. I tried to roll everything into the Replit instead of using the slides, and then the slides can just be a review for people. It's basically the bare minimum to create this hello world program. We need the setup function to create the canvas at a certain size, and we choose a background color and a text color. And then in the function, for the drawing function, we're setting the X value and the Y value basically to tell the program where to put the text. And then the size is kind of an offset saying basically every 25 pixels, we're going to put another line of text. And then the text align command tells you where to center it. You can center it to either side or the center. And then the text size takes the size that we had already set because we need it both to generate the size of the string when we're drawing it, as well as to maintain the offset so we have multiple lines. And then the last two commands are basically to draw the actual background and then to present the text at the given X and Y coordinate. Good question. I just got asked about the HTML file. So this is not really a programming topic, but JavaScript has to run embedded in something is one way to think of it. You can run JavaScript programs by themselves, but they aren't really that interesting. What makes them more powerful and more interesting is you can embed them into web pages to do dynamic processing. And pretty much every website on the internet, Reddit, Facebook, all the social media platforms, everything Google makes, they need to have some sort of dynamic representation. So you're not just like clicking on buttons and then going to another page, but you're clicking on buttons and on the same page things update and you get a new, like a news feed. As you keep scrolling, it's not going to display hundreds of news articles for you all at once. It'll it'll give you 10 and then you'll scroll down more and it'll give you another 10 and so on. And so the HTML file is kind of the file that holds together the content, which is the news article itself, the scripting, which are the programs that you use, and that's all handled by JavaScript. And then some of you can see here, we have something called CSS, and that takes care of the presentation of the web page itself. Everything from colors to the size of fonts is handled there. In the past, that used to be handled at the HTML level, but these days, everyone has decided that they're going to separate the program from the document, from how the document looks. And that's why we have HTML, JavaScript, and CSS pretty much as a combined bundle that people use them all together at. I hope that answered the question about what the HTML file is doing there. I don't want to go too far off topic. The width in X target canvases. Yes. So basically, what's being asked is, this width is the width of the canvas, and we're dividing it in two. So when we divide the width in two, we're trying to find the center point. So we're starting that X value at that position. Like, we're deriving it from the size of the canvas. And so the value for width is something that basically get that information from a P5 object, which is the canvas that we created here. I think this is a good stopping point for a break, because Jordan is trying to get some slides set up. And then when we get back from the break, we will bust out Replit and do the lab portion. Does that sound good with everyone? Type 1 in the chat if you're okay with starting the break now. Okay, the slides are all in the Discord right now, according to Jordan. So it is 6:51. Let's meet back at 7:01. In the Discord. Yeah.